Welcome back to Perp Games, and it's another game in our Summer Spectacular. Today we are looking at Down the Rabbit Hole from Cortopia Studios, and we published this just last week. It launched alongside Gun Club VR from the Binary Mill, and this is a very, very different game from the others we published so far. So this is essentially taking you back to the old classic adventure games that you loved of old, like kind of like the Days of the Tentacle and the Secret of Monkey Island, but this is really using the abilities and capabilities of virtual reality. So in this instance, you're dragging the scenery towards you, you're kind of looking inside it, you're peering around corners, and you're just trying to use the environment for a lot of puzzle solving. But you also use the analog sticks to control your character. So in this instance, you're playing, this is kind of like pre-Alice in Wonderland. So it's kind of set in the Wonderland world, but it's before Alice makes that tumble down the rabbit hole herself and changes everything and turns everything upside down. Or everything is already upside down, turns it right side up and then turns it upside down again. You get what I'm going with this, right? So yeah, we're just going to play through a little bit of Down the Rabbit Hole so you can see for yourself what the game is all about. This is the first opening section of the game where you have to try and find a key to unlock the trap door there. So I'm kind of like just looking around the room a little bit. So you can see I've got A popping up there so I can interact with areas of the room to kind of like try and find what I need the hidden areas I need to discover and things I need to look at. And yeah, essentially, it's all like the classic sort of adventure game style. See, there's a peculiar key there you see there, so I found that. But it's that classic adventure game style where there's a lot of exploration needed. You'll interact with a lot of the scenery. You'll talk to a lot of characters. There's multi choices in the dialogue as well, so you get to have conversations, and your actual actions will influence the overall story as well. So, but it's worth saying as well, there are multiple endings to Down the Rabbit Hole, so it's worth bearing in mind that this has got a lot of replay value as well, and you can get different ways. Your game can end in a different way from the first time you played it, and that comes down to the Queen's invitations. So throughout Down the Rabbit Hole, you'll encounter these kind of like pamphlets or these invitations essentially, which you need to collect. And if you get the whole lot of them, then I guess you get the game's kind of true final ending. But as mentioned as well, there are other endings if you only get some of the collectibles as well. But these essentially invite all the characters to the Queen's party at the end of the game. So you have to collect all the invitations per each character in order for them to show up. And obviously that will impact how things play out in the game. But yeah, I mean, this is developed by Cortopia Studios. You may know them from a game called Wands as well, which came out a couple of years back. This has been their latest game, and it's a dream come true to work on a game like this. I mean, for me personally, as a huge proponent of adventure games I loved and grew up with so much, I've seen from the very beginnings of VR, like the potential adventure games have in this medium. And I think, to me personally, not just saying that because Perp Games publish it, I think this is one of the best examples I've seen in VR so far of how to handle an adventure game and how VR can really benefit an adventure game and really bring that kind of dimension of storytelling to the new generation and to generations to come. So you can see there those kind of vines in front of me that are highlighted in blue. If I literally grab those with my controllers and then I drag it towards me, I can peer right in close to look at the scene as it happens there, and you can see that's the first introduction to the White Rabbit, and it's as a typical as you expect from the introduction to the White Rabbit. It's not all plain sailing. So I've properly tumbled down the rabbit hole, and here I am in Wonderland. So as you can see, there are familiar faces throughout this as well. As mentioned, obviously there's the Queen's party at the end of this as well. The White Rabbit you're seeing here, but it's interesting to note that some of the characters that you will meet in Down the Rabbit Hole I wouldn't say reach their final form, but they're not quite the same as you remember them from Wonderland or the Alice Adventures. There are some marked differences, shall we say, between the characters that you know from that series and the characters that are in Down the Rabbit Hole. So yeah, this is actually going to give you an example of the dialogue situation I mentioned in the game as well. So you obviously you have a chat with White Rabbit here, and in just a moment I'm going to have a few conversational choices which I can choose between, and depending on how I speak to White Rabbit depends on how the story progresses. So you got, where am I? There's a murdering queen. How are you talking? So the game really kind of, and basically what you hover your pointer over each individual conversation point, and then when it highlights it, and then once you allow it to stay there for a period of time, that's the conversation choice that you'll go forward with. But yeah, I mean, this has been a really great game. It's across multiple virtual reality formats as well, so it's not just on PlayStation VR, even though that's where we're publishing it. You can find it on other virtual reality formats as well. And the idea is just to create a really immersive 360 diorama. I think that's something that Cortopia really worked hard on, is to try and create an environment where you've got things happening behind you, you've got things happening to the sides and in front of you, and it's up to you, the player, to really immerse yourself and interact with that environment on that kind of scale. You know, you really kind of get yourself involved in Wonderland as if you're part of that experience. And indeed, you know, you have to look around completely in some puzzles because the environment plays such a key role in, you know, how to progress within the game. And again, you know, that's a really great premise of this. So you're basically playing a young girl who's in search of her pet called Patches. Now, the interesting thing about Down the Rabbit Hole as well, it's not just the case of your conversational choices will determine, you know, where the story progresses. You can actually make other marked decisions as well. So you can determine what actual type of creature Patches is, for example. You can determine, you know, the kind of aesthetic that the creature has, you know, if it has any distinguishing features. You can choose between multiple scenarios in that instance. And obviously move between rooms here as well. So dragging, you don't just pull the vines toward you to peer into scenes. You actually also have to drag yourself left to right as well, so you can move between them and kind of really get that sense of the diorama moving around there. So again, this is sort of what I mentioned about Patches. In just a moment, I'll be able to determine what creature I want Patches to be. But yeah, as I said, you know, you interact with familiar characters, you know, and there's a lot of puzzle solving. There's a lot of secrets in this game as well, as mentioned. So there are multiple endings. So there are lots of things to discover and uncover while you go through it as well. And, you know, and it just looking at all the subtle details as well. I mean, the attention to detail that Cortopia put into this, you know, the incredible art style, the vision that they have for the game. So yeah, I can determine whether Patches is a lizard, a turtle, or a cat. So you could even say it's called Catches. But I'm not going to go with a cat, because a cat feels like the familiar choice. I'm going to go with a turtle. I love a good turtle, you know. That I think one of my favorite stories growing up was The Hare and the Tortoise, you know. And obviously, I know that's not. And obviously, I love the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. So, turtle feels like the right call for me. That feels like my kind of pet. But yeah, I mean, I think the voice acting in this is also really, really good. You know, the characters come alive very well. There's a lot of good, you know, there's a great score as well in this as well. The musical soundtrack is really, really lovingly done. And what's interesting as well, when you have made your decisions throughout the game, they will actually remain on the environment. So you can backtrack within Down the Rabbit Hole. You can revisit areas that you've previously been to collect them, you know, the invitations, or to just revisit them and look at them in style. And you will see those playing cards appear throughout the world, and you can actually, you know, remind yourself of, you know, what the decisions you've made and also what's happening within this environment as well. And that's actually one of the invitations right there that I've just found. So that's the whole example of examining the area very, very closely. And it shows you the progress marker. So you've got the different characters within that. So I've just got the one invitation so far. And once the invitation letter reaches the end of that, then of course you can then, that character is invited to the party at the end of the game. Yeah, and there's a lot of that subtle Easter eggs you can have as well. So I love that about this game, is that, you know, I think that was one of the magics of adventure games of old. I mean, they had a linear story that you would follow, and there was always that linear path that you had to complete. And it's a similar situation with Down the Rabbit Hole, or you can re-explore areas as mentioned, and you can kind of revisit them and get the different you know, invitations and such. But there is also a lot of hidden Easter eggs to find within the game, and a lot of hidden things to see and do. So I think that's one of the clever things about the game, especially, is that, you know, it feels, it has a linear story, but it doesn't feel linear. It feels very open. So this is probably the first major puzzle in the game that's coming up at the moment. So you have to find a way to get past this clock, which has a door embedded into it. So I'm not going to show you the solution to this. I'm going to give you a kind of a feel for what you have to do, but also it sort of shows you the dialogue. You can have a white rabbit at the moment, but essentially you have to adjust the clocks there to your left to kind of influence the main clock that you're seeing, the main clock face you're seeing in front of you there. And I think this gives you a real key example of the quirkiness of the game as well. So you'll have to think outside the box, shall we say, to solve some of these puzzles. Some of them are not going to be straightforward. You are going to struggle a little bit to kind of get used to the game's logic, sense of logic. But I think as long as you kind of, you're familiar with Wonderland, you're familiar with kind of the classic stories, I think you'll have have a good idea, shall we say, of a kind of where your mind needs to go to solve some of these puzzles. But yeah, as White Rabbit's kind of illustrated there, that there's one way to get past this door and there's a problem. Yeah, it's not, he's never actually seen it open. So that's a bit of a problem, admittedly. But yeah, so that's one of the really cool things that you need to try and figure out as you progress through the story. And again, I'm not going to show you the solution to this because, you know, that's not what this video is about. I don't want to kind of spoil things for you, but I just want to give you kind of a flavor of what to expect from Down the Rabbit Hole as you play through the game itself. And you can see things up close as well to give you some visual clues and pointers. You can really get into those right up close to those clocks and things. And you can sometimes get some clues from the characters as well, which can be really helpful, especially if you're really struggling and get stuck. And worst case scenario, if you just don't know what to do, there's probably plenty of solutions online. You can probably find some pointers from the visual guides or video guides or even text walkthroughs and things like that. So this is the next section, as mentioned. Once you pass the clock, you've got like this room here is kind of illustrates some of what the things you can do as well. There are different types of puzzles in Down the Rabbit Hole. So this one actually has a chest which you need to open. Again, you've got a clock face there. There's an invitation you can see there subtly just hidden in the background. So sometimes, as mentioned there, you do have to enter a first-person view to get the full picture of everything. Whether that's sometimes finding clues on the walls which you can't see from like if you're you're not actually playing the female character, or sometimes to find the little hidden invitations. So you really do have to play the game in different ways in order to find all of its hidden secrets. And I think that's what I like a lot about Down the Rabbit Hole as well, is that you don't just you don't have to, there's not one dimension to the play style. You really do have to experiment with different perspectives. You have to try and work out the most logical way forward with puzzles, the interactions with the characters. You have to be very careful what you decide to say and don't say or do say, and just pay so much close attention to the small visual cues in the background. So it's very, very clever. This is another example of a very fun little puzzle, actually. I'm going to show you this one. So you have to move the pendulums up and down in order to find a way across, and then you can actually climb the ladder to escape and get out to this area. But yeah, essentially you have to balance them just right. They have to be proportioned just right, otherwise you're not going to be able to move forward and progress. So yeah, that gives you an example again of the kind of the quirkiness of these puzzles and the unusual nature of them. And I think for someone like me, who again, I grew up on games like Day of the Tentacle, so you saw what I had to adjust them there so I could jump between them. Games like Day of the Tentacle, which had some of the most obscure puzzle solutions of all time. Seriously, look some of those up, because I think unless you kind of happened upon it by chance, or you found a solution, or you just whatever it was, some of them were not obvious. And I think that reminds me a lot of what Cortopia have achieved here with Down the Rabbit Hole. It's lovely. You can see there as well. Also, so that's another interesting thing about this as well. You're not always done with a puzzle. Just when you think you're done with a puzzle, you're not always quite done with it. This is so another thing as well down the rabbit hole. Yes, you see familiar characters, and yes, you see characters which you would like and would expect to find in Wonderland. But Cortopia have also created some new characters for this as well, some memorable characters. And I think these bunch of cards here really remind me of those characters that are very distinct, very unique in this world. They're very appropriate. They fit a lot. And you can see there that they mentioned that Patches is a turtle. So that choice that I made very early on in the game has already had a consequential impact on the dialogue that I'm having later on in the game. So you can kind of get a feel for how important your decision making is already. And this is still quite early on in the game. There's still a lot to do. So you're already getting the feel for that. And I think something that the way that it's written as well is very, very good. It likens itself very well to the source material, but it also has created something very, very separate, different, and enjoyable. There's some good wit in this, some good jokes. The story itself is actually surprisingly compelling, even though the essence of it is finding your pet Patches. There's so much more to it as you progress through Wonderland, because it's obviously, you're trying to find your pet is the essence of the story, but there is, as you're discovering the world, as you're learning more about the world, and kind of as you're talking to more of its characters, you realize that there is so much more to this game than meets the eye. I love that. That's a great pun as well. I really want to deck that guy. That's one of my favorite lines in the whole game. He's known as 4.5, which is also a very clever pun on playing cards as well. But yeah, I mean, Down the Rabbit Hole is now available from Perp Games. You pick it up on the Perp Games store as well. We have actually still got some very limited collectible editions available with playing cards, which you can only get from the Perp Games store. But the game is available at EU retailers as well, so you can pick it up online from shops, or you can pick it up in your local store. It's for me. Of all the games in our Summer Spectacular, I think Cortopia's Down the Rabbit Hole holds a special place in my heart, purely because I am an adventure game enthusiast. I love these games so much, and I think there's a lot of potential for the future of the genre in virtual reality as well, and I hope other developers are looking at this. But thanks for joining us. Take another look at Down the Rabbit Hole. We'll see you next time.
Get back home. I'm going to be late for something.